Despite all of the recent setbacks, NASA remains keen to plant humanity's footprint on the Moon again through the Artemis mission. And this time, the space agency is hopeful that the mission will lead to a permanent human presence on the lunar surface. But what exactly can we expect from the Artemis 1 mission, and why is it so important? More than half a century ago, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin made history as the first humans to land on the Moon. Between then and 1972, NASA scientists continued to travel and land on our nearest satellite at will between 1969 and December 1972, when Apollo 17 astronauts Gene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt made a grand entry and exit from the Moon's surface. But somehow the prominent space agency has failed to make a successful landing on the lunar surface. However, that is about to change with the advent of the Artemis mission. There possibly couldn't have been a better name for this project because Artemis was the twin sister of Apollo and the goddess of the moon in Greek mythology. Similar to the Apollo mission, the Artemis program will have submissions which will be represented by the name Artemis followed by a numerical suffix. Artemis 1 will be the first one to launch, and expectedly, it would be an event despite the fact that it is a crewless mission. Critically, it will be NASA's first attempt at exploring the Moon since the end of the Apollo era. In case you're wondering, the Artemis 1 mission is actually different from the usual rocket launch conducted occasionally by SpaceX and other spacefaring companies. For instance, the Saturn V spacecraft was solely responsible for transporting astronauts on the Apollo mission to the Moon between the 1960s and 70s. But things will be much different with the Artemis mission. According to NASA, the Artemis 1 mission will utilize several space vehicles beginning from Space Launch System, otherwise known as SLS. The SLS will run the first lap of the mission, which involves transporting Orion spacecraft or crew capsule beyond the Kármán line into orbit. The Orion spacecraft is another vehicle involved in the long-stretch journey to the Moon. It's placed directly on top of the SLS. After making its entry into orbit, Orion rocket will detach itself from the SLS and continue its journey to the Moon's orbit, where it will dock with the Gateway. The process would be more like how rockets dock with the International Space Station, ISS. In fact, the Gateway can be described as a mini ISS, except that we don't know yet if it can house astronauts for weeks and months like the ISS does. But what we do know for sure is that it will hold astronauts for a while they complete the final phase of the mission, which is to land on the lunar surface. Of course, astronauts will not be landing on the lunar surface with parachutes like James Bond. Instead, they'll be transported from the Moon's orbit to its surface by a device known as the Human Landing System. This will be the most complex space mission ever, and NASA is just about prepared for it. Expectedly, the SLS is the most powerful spacecraft in history, even more powerful than the Saturn V. Its engine would be fueled by a combination of liquid oxygen and hydrogen, and the rocket itself will be powered by 2 solid rocket boosters. Experts have described it as a hybrid version of the Space Shuttle and Apollo Saturn V rocket. Overall, the Orion spacecraft traveled across a distance of around 450,600 kilometers. It sailed in the great abyss of space longer than any crewed ship had done without docking to a space station. And more importantly, it traveled back home faster and hotter than any other spacecraft in history. The Artemis 1 mission is basically the testing phase of the overall program. During this mission, the Orion crew capsule launched into space for about 6 weeks. The aim here was to test all the systems and components that will ferry astronauts to the Moon in the future. One critical component that was tested is the heat shield of the Orion capsule, which will protect astronauts from the high radiation and extreme temperatures experienced during the journey and re-entry process. At a reported speed of 25,000 miles per hour, the Artemis 1 mission performed the fastest re-entry since the Apollo mission. Hence the need to make sure that the heat shield is in a perfect working condition. In addition, the proposed spacecraft carried 13 small satellites and about 3 dummies. These satellites deposited around the Moon's orbit, from where it will perform a series of precursor science experiments. As for the dummies, they were laced with sensors that will monitor the condition within the spacecraft so that scientists can evaluate if they're perfect to keep every future crew safe and sound. Ironically, the Artemis 1 mission has sailed to the moon's orbit already, and it should have landed back on Earth by the time you're watching this video. After a series of technical issues that led to delays and postponements, the Artemis 1 mission launched from NASA's Kennedy Space Center on the 16th of November 2022. And since then, it's been exploring the moon's surface from its orbit. On the 5th of December 2022, the spacecraft zoomed in close on the moon's surface from 3,200 kilometers away and captured the 6 landing sites that the NASA astronauts visited during the Apollo program. Ordinarily, it should have been 7 landing spots, but Apollo 13 had to abort its mission due to an emergency. Furthermore, the Orion spacecraft traveled even closer to the lunar surface, about 129 kilometers away. After completing several flybys around the moon, the Orion spacecraft fired up its main engine briefly for less than 4 minutes to readjust its path towards Earth. By all accounts, this represents the longest engine burn conducted on the 25.5-day trip. The spacecraft is expected to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere at a speed of 32,187 kilometers per hour, where it will be met with extreme pressure and temperature of around 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The systems and component that make up the Orion spacecraft have been specially designed to withstand these harsh conditions and disperse some of the excess speed before the spacecraft plunges into the Pacific Ocean. At the completion of the mission, the Orion capsule would have traveled more than 1.3 million miles in the great void of space. The Artemis 1, like we mentioned earlier, is just a test flight that will precede the subsequent Artemis flights. In fact, NASA has already scheduled Artemis 2 to launch in 2024. The Artemis 2 mission will carry astronauts on board. However, much like the Artemis mission, the spacecraft is expected to just circle round the moon before returning to Earth. As far as we know, Artemis 3 will be the grand mission that will return humans to the surface of the moon for the first time in the 21st century. During this mission, astronauts will not only circle the moon, they will also touch down on the lunar surface, just like Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin did back in 1961. The Apollo mission was undoubtedly very special. Transporting and landing humans on the lunar surface at a time where our space exploration technologies were still at a nursery stage is absolutely outstanding. However, Artemis is expected to take things to a whole new level. According to NASA sources, the Artemis mission will transport at least 1 female astronaut and a person of color to the moon, something that had never been achieved before. But more importantly, it will lay the foundation for the proposed Moon Village, which would more or less be a permanent base for humans on the lunar surface. On a second thought, if the plans for the proposed Moon Village are successful, it could be our escape plan from planet Earth. We could set up a sustainable human colony on the moon where people will live, work, and do other things, just like we do here. Quite possibly, the human base on the moon could also be a launch pad for our big dream of sending astronauts to Mars and other distant locations across space. It will be our next step to discover space like never before. A home to scientific experiments and discoveries beyond imagination, and our farthest cosmic outpost in the ever-growing darkness. But to achieve all this, Artemis is our ship to conquer the cosmic ocean, which makes this mission truly unique.